From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Venezuela announced it will move the European headquarters of a state oil company, PDVSA, from Lisbon to Moscow. The decision was announced by Venezuela's Vice President, Delcy Rodriguez, after meeting the Russian Foreign Minister in Moscow. Rodriguez says Europe no longer provides the necessary guarantees to protect her country's assets. Venezuela is also set to sign new trade deals with Russia on energy, agriculture, and health.
President Nicolás Maduro has ordered that the offices of state-owned oil company PDVSA in Europe located in Lisbon be moved to Moscow. This is a way of strengthening our cooperation ties.
Russia will continue to assist the Venezuelan authorities in resolving social and economic problems, including through the provision of legitimate humanitarian aid. In general, we believe that the best way to help Venezuelans is to develop practical, pragmatic, and mutually beneficial interactions.
In an exclusive interview with RT, Venezuela's Vice President Delcy Rodriguez said the government has already taken concrete legal steps to reclaim assets of which it was robbed by the U.S. and which have been frozen by European banks.
The Venezuelan government will mount a legal defense against the U.S.'s move to freeze assets belonging to the state-owned PDVSA oil giant and its U.S. subsidiary, Citgo. Regarding the European financial blockade, we have hired lawyers to protect our interests. First and foremost, it concerns gold, which has been unlawfully retained by the Bank of England. We have also taken steps towards the legal protection of Venezuela. I'm talking about the theft of Venezuela's assets by the U.S. Venezuela has the right to protect its legal interests.
This comes after the United States Treasury Department announced more sanctions against Venezuela, this time around targeting 6 senior officers in the Bolivarian Armed Forces and police. They include the head of the National Guard and the commanders in charge of military and police forces on Venezuela's borders with Brazil and Colombia. The U.S. claims that these units used force against civilians last weekend, but video evidence has shown opposition activists inciting violence against soldiers. An African National Congress delegation is currently on a fact-finding mission in Venezuela. The delegation, which includes alliance partners, are led by an ANC Secretary General. The ruling party in South Africa is one of many which have maintained the view that foreign intervention aimed at instigating regime change through unconstitutional means is not acceptable but creates a dangerous world order. Venezuelan opposition lawmaker Juan Guaidó is risking arrest upon his planned return to Venezuela. He had spent the past few days touring Latin American countries in defiance of a travel ban imposed by Venezuela's Supreme Court. On Saturday, Guaidó met with President Lenín Moreno in Ecuador before he visited Argentina and Paraguay, where he was met with massive protests against his visit. On Sunday, Guaidó announced that he will return to Venezuela soon, as he called for fresh protests throughout the country. And during his travels, Guaidó is being led through Latin America by Kimberly Breyer, the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Western Hemisphere Affairs. Breyer served as a CIA analyst for more than a decade and a manager in the espionage industry. She has a bachelor's degree in Spanish and completed a master's degree at George Washington University. That is the same university where Guaidó did his postgraduate studies. Following last weekend's failed attempt to force humanitarian aid into Venezuela by the U.S.-backed opposition, both sides of the border are now suffering the consequences. Let's take a look at what happened in Cúcuta, Colombia, after international media left.
This is how the Simón Bolívar Bridge, located on the Colombian-Venezuelan border, looked on Friday, February the 22nd. Fast forward to the 23rd, and that's the state it was left in. And it was the same scenario at the Santander Bridge, located a few kilometers north. As a result of the Colombian-Venezuelan border was closed permanently. Cameras, activists and lawmakers all left, but the aftermath has proven costly.
This situation is only getting worse, because after they closed the border, we lost a lot of activity in our town. We have fewer work opportunities. Informal work is on the rise in Cúcuta. The government gives us nothing, no benefits, so we have very few options.
The city lives of Venezuelans. Our supermarkets are closed. Street vendors are not able to sell their wares. And it's all because Venezuelans are not working anymore. After the concert and the whole circus surrounding it, they have left us in a dire situation.
This attack against Venezuela was carried out with the political and logistical support of Colombian authorities who openly supported a coup d'etat.
As usual, our city has been left to clean up the mess. Things are much more difficult now. There's more militarization. President Iván Duque was in Cúcuta for 3 days, and he never once mentioned any of the issues in this city. Unemployment, extreme poverty, widespread violence, a border that's at mercy of armed groups in the hands of local drug trafficking gangs. They continue to work here as if nothing has happened.
Cúcuta is strategically located for a possible military invasion of Venezuela.
There are many people who support a military invasion of Venezuela, but they have no idea what war is. They have never visited the region of Catatumbo or other regions where campesinos live, or know how they live. 25,000 campesinos have been evicted from their lands in the north of Santander. About 5,000 people have forcibly disappeared, 217 people last year alone. Here in Colombia, we're living through a real humanitarian crisis.
The coup failed, but the damage done to communities on both sides of the border is apparent.
After 7 days of striking, teachers in Oakland, California are set to vote this Sunday on a new contract deal. The 3,000 teachers took to the picket line on February 21st to demand higher pay, small classes, and more funding. And on Friday, the Oakland Educational Association announced the teachers want everything they demanded. The contract includes an 11% salary increase and a one-time 3% bonus. The Oakland Education Association tweeted, quote, "This is a historic, not conscious contract with a win in every deserve." 3 years have passed since the murder of Honduran environmental activist Berta Cáceres. Let's take a look back at her life.
In 2006, when the Honduran government announced the construction of a dam on Hualcarque River, on the land of the Lenca indigenous people in Rio Blanco, the community felt their government had completely failed them. Not knowing what to do, they approached environmental activist Berta Cáceres, who herself was a member of the Lenca community. Berta organized the community and confronted both the government and giant construction companies, including one of the world's largest construction companies, DESA. She knew how important the river was for the community and her people.
When we started the fight for Rio Blanco, I would go into the river and I could feel what the river was telling me. I knew it was going to be difficult, but I also knew we were going to triumph, because the river told me so.
Her undeterred fight and relentless determination to save the sacred river Hualcarque led her to win the prestigious environmental award, the Goldman Prize, in 2015.
Somos custodios ancestrales el pueblo Lenca, resguardados además por los espíritus de las niñas, que nos enseñan que dar la vida de múltiples formas por la defensa de los ríos es dar la vida para el bien de la humanidad y de este planeta.
Indeed, she gave her life to save her land and the identity of her community. On March 2, 2016, 2 armed men stormed her house and gunned her down.
We place direct responsibility on the government for this situation. Although the ones who carried out this action might be hiring assassins paid by transnational capital. But this is the situation we're going through in Honduras. A regrettably dramatic and regrettable situation.
At least 8 arrests were made surrounding her murder, but no concrete action was taken to protect her family or other Honduran activists. Her murder was internationally condemned and drew a spotlight on Honduras. According to the NGO Global Witness, at least 124 activists have been murdered in the country since 2010, making it the most dangerous country in the world for environmental activists and land defenders. Widespread outrage against her killing led to the halt of the Agua Sacra Dam project, and a group of international experts known as GAIPE was formed to investigate the murder of Berta Cáceres. A year later, GAIPE found that FtS, the Honduran government, and the banks financing the project played a major role in the death of Berta Cáceres. Since the beginning of her death, the trial has been marred by cover-ups from the government. 3 years have passed since Berta sacrificed her life, but many questions remain unanswered. Many involved in the plotting of her death are still free. Last year, 7 people were convicted, but the bigger fish from DESA remain untouched. Meanwhile, Berta's voice continues to resonate in the heart of the Lenca people.
Despertemos, despertemos, humanidad. Ya no hay tiempo.
Telesur spoke with Berta Cáceres' nephew Silvio Carrillo about the family's continued push for justice and the current status of the investigation.
There is evidence directing towards the government, towards the people that own the dam. They are one of the wealthiest families in Honduras, in Central America, and they have complete control over what happens, over the police, over the military. And this government of Juan's corrupt government of Juan Orlando Hernandez is consolidating power. He's making sure generals are kept in place and that are loyal to him. He's making sure they're being taken care of and getting promoted. So no, I mean, those intellectual authors are running rampant and doing whatever they want. It's business as usual.
We'll be back in a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. It is official. On March 26, Jamaica will vote in a by-election in the Portland East constituency. This following the murder of the constituency's elected representative last month. The ruling Jamaica Labour Party will be seeking to increase its majority in the parliament, but its candidate Anne-Marie Bass faces a stiff challenge from Damien Crawford of the People's National Party, which has led Eastern Portland for the last 3 decades.
The 8th of March will be the nomination day when Action Ann will formally be registered as a candidate. The 25th of March will be Action Day.
In Brazil, former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva was temporarily released from prison on Saturday to attend the funeral of his grandson, Arthur Araujo da Silva. More details in this report.
A political and journalistic operation took place from Curitiba to the municipality of San Bernardo do Campo in Sao Paulo after the death of Lula's 7-year-old grandson. The PT party did not call their militants since the federal police prohibited Lula from talking to the hundreds of people who arrived to the cemetery to show solidarity and respect.
Lula is a political prisoner. There is no doubt about that. Many corrupt politicians should be in jail, but they are not. Lula was sentenced without evidence. He was persecuted.
Former President Lula spoke a few words in front of his grandson's coffin. "You suffered a lot of bullying for being my grandson. I'm going to prove my innocence, and I'm going to take my innocence certificate to heaven to show it to you. Go and find Marisa and wait for your grandfather to meet you soon." Since the beginning of the political persecution against Lula, he has lost his wife, his brother, and now his grandson. The people who assisted in the funeral rejected the persecution and psychological torture by the judiciary judicial system and the national media.
Yesterday at 12:20, the media already knew about the death of the child, even before his family members knew about it, including former President Lula. He found out through the media. No one told him. He found out in the most cruel way, by these mainstream media outlets who have always hated former President Lula da Silva.
The total of 2 sentences now turns Lula's legal case into life imprisonment. Many people started chanting, "Free Lula." They also repudiated Judge Sergio Moro, who condemned Lula to prison during the last electoral campaign and then became Minister of Justice under Jair Bolsonaro, who himself faces multiple corruption accusations against his family.
It is a difficult situation to lose a wife, a friend, a brother, a grandchild is extremely hard for anyone. Even worse for an innocent person like Lula, who has been in prison for almost a year. There are no words to explain this moment.
Lula will spend the next 4 days isolated in prison. Those who know him trust the strength of the former president, but they say that a loss so great cannot be underestimated.
In Bolivia, thousands have celebrated what's known as the Devil's Carnival of Oruro. The main dance is the Diablada, and as part of the festivities, angels got a chance to dance with the devil. It is a fundamental part of Oruro's carnival, which combines an indigenous religious ceremony with the Spanish carnival and a bit of Catholic beliefs. Rio's carnival is famous for its grand street parades, and the week-long celebrations have kicked into high gear. Rio Samba schools were in full swing for carnival as they parade in a dazzling display of festivity at the Samba Drome. The competition between Samba schools is fierce. A first place result is bragging rights among Rio's mostly poor communities. There are also street parties known as blocos. But Rio's carnival is also an act of resistance to the government. As revelers took to the streets, there was a constant display of strong political messages against President Jair Bolsonaro.
This current government has accused us teachers of indoctrinating students and of imposing certain ideologies on them. So as we have been very massacred by this government, we decided to create a costume to make fun of it all.
Carnival is a time to fight against Bolsonaro's ideas. It's time for us to show ourselves, for Brazil to understand that gay people exist in Brazil, that we are not going to hide ourselves, that we go out in the streets and show we exist.
Meanwhile, some also took to the streets to express their support for former President Lula da Silva and to the people of Venezuela. Chants of freedom and sovereignty ran out, aimed to pro-Lula celebration. Persons also expressed solidarity with Venezuela's government, who they say are victims of US-backed opposition groups. As Carnival is celebrated around the world, festivities also got underway in Uruguay. The satirical group Agarrate Catalina portrayed costumes which spoke to political and social issues. The traditional humor and musicality is characteristic of the country's popular theater groups known as murgas. Also in Venezuela, thousands of families in the capital Caracas are enjoying the carnival holidays in peace. On Saturday, several events and cultural programs took place across the city and around the country. The government has assured that security personnel will be deployed at a national level to guarantee the safety of the Venezuelan people during the holidays. Revelers filled the streets of Torres Vedras, the home of Portugal's most famous carnival. The event featured floats with satirical depictions of world-renowned figures, among them US President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, and a figure of Cristiano Ronaldo, the country's most famous sportsman, also made an appearance. And men dressed as women known as matrafonas were also part of the traditional event.
Everyone participates in this carnival. It's a carnival for families. It's carnival with a lot of social satire and political satire. The Torres Vedras Carnival is the most Portuguese carnival in Portugal.
It's special because we are different. It's a time to enjoy. There's no trouble amongst people. It's all very good, very good. I may be biased because I'm from Torres Vedras, but it's really good fun.
More than 10,000 people took to the streets of Western Croatia in a long tradition of celebrating Carnival. The Rijeka Carnival Parade is one of the most famous in Southern Eastern Europe and attracts groups from about 10 countries in the region each year. And with this story, we'll come to the... we're going to take a short break. Join us after this. Welcome back. The United Nations has launched an appeal for humanitarian aid to help Zimbabwean people. The UN has called for $2,234 million in humanitarian aid for over 5 million Zimbabweans in need. Zimbabwe's roughly 17 million people are in the grip of a drought and a sagging economy, crippled by sanctions imposed by the United States and its allies.
We're requesting for, as a part of this launch, $234 million for multi-sectoral humanitarian and resilience building activities that will be implemented by some 70 humanitarian partners.
Thousands have staged fresh protests in cities around Algeria to demand President Abdelaziz Bouteflika step down. The outpouring of dissent comes as word spread that their president was declared his bid for re-election. Opponents say the 82-year-old is no longer fit to lead, citing his poor health. Bouteflika is also accused of corruption and has been heavily criticized for failing tackling high youth unemployment. Hundreds marched in the streets of Beirut to protest against child marriage in Lebanon. They called on Parliament to make 18 the legal minimum age for marriage in the country. Religious community courts currently determine the legal age of marriage, which each court enforcing its own law. Some allow girls under 15 years of age to be married.
We are here to say that it is time for us to approve a law prohibiting the marriage of minors because it is not only a feminist demand but a human demand that must be recognized.
In Italy, tens of thousands of people took to the streets of Milan on Saturday to send a message to the country's right-wing government. The demonstrators marched against racism and discrimination. The protesters also criticized the government for not letting migrant ships arrive at the Italian ports. Chicago's next mayor will be a black woman and will be a historic first for the U.S. city. Mayoral candidates Lori Lightfoot and Toni Preckwinkle are scheduled to face off in a runoff vote on April 2nd. Whichever wins, it will be a significant milestone when the first African-American woman mayor is elected to run the country's third largest city in its 181-year history. And with this story, we come to the end of this news brief. You can find this and many other stories in our website at telestorenglish.net. And don't forget to follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telestory English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.